Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Hitzman Outdoors, and on today's episode, we're going to talk about spring fishing. We're going to be talking about how I break down clear water lakes and your turbid or tea-colored lakes. We're going to start with our clear water, and we're going to go with something like this. This is a Ned rig. You're going to have just a small plastic bait on a little Ned rig head. This is the Berkley half head jig head, or you can use your favorite brand, it don't really matter. With those, I kind of like to stick to your browns or greens just because I'm trying to imitate like a crawdad or like a goby or something like that. Typically, I don't use these too often just because in the spring I like to power fish, but if it's sunny out and no wind, that's something I like to go to. Next up, we're going to talk about lipless crankbaits. These are something I really like to use in clear water. I fish shallow flats where there's sparse grass or there can be rocks. And what I like to do with these is I'll cast them out, I'll let them hit bottom, and I'll slowly reel them back into me. And if I'm not getting bites doing that, I'll cast it out, let it hit bottom, and I'll kind of just lightly bring the rod tip up so it can vibrate up and then fall down. And typically when you're fishing that way, I've found majority of the time when you pull it up and as it's going back down, the fish, if it's there, it's going to react and suck that bait in. And when you go to lift back up, you're going to feel the weight of the fish and you just kind of ease into it and start reeling and keep the pressure on them. You will get a hit as it's going up sometimes. It just depends on the time of year. A couple colors I like to use. This is brown craw. Or you have this color. This is a blue shad color. This is bleeding Tennessee shad. Or if it's super sunny and a little bit of wind, I really like to go with your really flashy colors like black and silver. Now this will work on a cloudy day, but I typically like to stick to that in the sunnier days. Next up, we're going to go to these style of baits right here. These are the Berkley Frittside size 5. Now, the reason I like these is because compared to a typical square bill, they do not have the hard wobble. These are they barely, wow, I can't talk. They barely wobble in the water. And where I fish these is sand flats, rocks. I also like to, if somebody puts their dock in early, sometimes you wouldn't believe it, but fish will get up under those docks and come out and wait to hit this. Or I also have found on lakes where there's like old leaves and stuff that fall to the bottom where you can see clear water all the way around and then there's like a dark spot. If you cast these over the dark spot, you're going to typically catch a fish because them dark spots hold heat and then fish sitting there to bathe in the sun. Now, a couple colors in these I like to use, which I'll get to how I fish them here in a second. These are the colors I like to use. We got Special Red Craw, Ghost Morning Dawn, and then if it's a little cloudier, it's not sunny day, I like to go with something like this. This is Midnight Pearl. It's like a black and like a pearlish white color, so like a shad style. And then we got, this is Olive Red Crawl, I want to say it is, but that's also a good color because it's not super bright in that clear water, so it don't stand out super too much. Sometimes this one's broke, which this one I did phenomenal on last year. This is regular Special Red Craw. You can get away with this sometimes, especially on windy days when the bank you're fishing is getting beat by the wind. It'll kind of create the sand to create like a dust cloud. You throw that baby in there, you're gonna catch fish. Next up, we're gonna go to these right here. So these are Berkley Stunna 112s. Or I also use the 112 plus ones a lot, which is just the deeper diving version. These go 3 to 6 feet, and the deeper diving version goes 6 to 10. Or even if the fish are super deep in the early spring, like when the ice just comes off the water, you can use the Berkley or any brand's +2, and that one goes 10 to 14 feet. And these are a slow sinking bait. These both, this is a natural perch color and this is Ghost Morning Dawn. Just phenomenal colors for clear water, especially this one because of how many perch that are in Michigan. Or if you're like down south where they have lots of shad in their lakes, that's a good color. Typically there's not too many lakes that we have shads in. We do have a lot of shad in the river, but that's another video. So how I fish these is I will fish where you can see the color change in the water when you're fishing shallower. I really like to fish these down that edge where we'll say you're fishing 2 feet, but it drops down into say 3 to 4 feet. Them are perfect areas to fish these because them fish will sit on the deeper side, even though it's not deep. It's deep enough for them to sit and ambush up. That's why I like those. I also like, you know what, we'll get to these last. We're gonna go into muddy water, and these 3 baits here we'll talk about last because these kind of can be, used either way. So we're gonna go into muddy or dirtier water. Instead of that open concept Ned rig, typically a lot of our lakes around here that turbid colored water have a lot of grass that was dead or just starting to grow for this year. They also have a lot of stumps, things you can catch up on a lot. So I like to go with a weedless presentation. This is a Fusion 19 offset worm hook. And then I throw something like this. This is just your standard old stick worm. It's a Berkley Power Bait Max Scent 6-inch General Green Pumpkin. And that's honestly the main color I'm going to go with, that or June Bug, which is a purplish blue looking color. Next up, something I love to use this time of year, or not this time of year, I wish it was that time of year, but something I really like to use is a bladed jig. This is the Berkley Slobber Knocker, or I also like to use the Evergreen Jackhammer. And some baits, or we'll go to the colors and then I'll show you the trailers for that. This is Hot Craw or Flame Craw. You got your standard old green pumpkin, or you got your green pumpkin shad. This can imitate anything really. It can imitate a perch, a shad, bluegill. It imitates a lot of things. The trailers, there's 3 trailers I'm gonna go with. If I'm fishing deep water over grass, dead grass, or starting to come up grass, I'll fish a straight-tailed minnow style bait, and that's gonna allow it to stay deeper. This is something that I've found stays in the middle. You can kind of work it high or you can work it low if you want it to. This is the Berkley The Deal. This is a bigger size. They also have a 4.5. They also have a 3.5 inch. I typically like to stay with the 3.5, but I will go with that 4.5 if I'm trying to get a bigger bite. And then last, for trailers, I like to use something like this. This is the Hot Craw color in the Berkley Power Bait Shape 108, it's called. The reason I like this is, for in particular, the one lake I really like to fish. If you want to keep your bait high, that's not it. This is a 1/2 ounce. Say I was using this color in 1/2 ounce and I had this paired up in there and I'm fishing that 3 foot range, 3 to 4 foot range. These like to rise. So instead of throwing this 3/8 ounce, I'm gonna throw a 1/2 ounce because then it'll kind of be a happy medium and it'll keep it down deeper instead of rising up to the surface, where you're not gonna catch as many fish because they're not willing to chase like that. You can get it to happen, but I would like to prefer to stay in the strike zone for longer. That way I can make more production of my day. And then lastly, some people are scared to use these style of baits, but if you knew how many small fish I've caught on a bait this size, this is the 8-inch Huddleston. This is an ROF 12. Now the reason I have an ROF 12 is because when it's right after the ice comes off and the water's starting to warm up, them fish are still deep and starting to kind of move up the edges. I like to throw this and let it sink to the bottom. Once it gets to the bottom, you literally, while you're reeling, you really are just slowly, just reeling it very slowly across the bottom, and they'll come down and hit it. And especially in Michigan, because we don't have a ton of like 10, I've never caught a 10 pounder. I'd like to, but we don't have a ton of bass over the, like, we'll say 6 pound mark. We do have a good number, but you know, they're harder to come by. So I like to run a stinger hook on these. That way, if they do short strike it and they don't get this hook, they're gonna get that treble hook and it's still attached to the bait. I like to do that. Or if you're not confident in that big of a bait, you can go with the 6-inch Huddleston. This is the HUD 68 Special. It's the weedless version. You can see when I compress it down, the hook pops out. But this is also a ROF 12. And again, I'm gonna slow roll it across the bottom. And then, lastly, when it warms up a little more, you're getting closer to the spawn and you know the fish are moving up shallower. This is a bait I like to use. This is the ABT Lures Suicide Glide. It's a 9-inch glide bait in the color Lightning Trout. Now, when it comes to these style of baits, depending on where you're fishing, you want to go with a natural perch color. And this color, honestly, you can throw this color, even if the lake don't have trout, I recommend throwing this. You will catch fish. But if you're on a lake that does have trout, go with something like that. This is Ghost Shasta, it's called. So it's kind of like a plant, or what do they call them? A trout that they plant into the lake. That's basically the color of these. So those are the baits that I like to use, and you can kind of tie these in to clear or dirty water. Just depends on where you're fishing. If you're going with the dirtier water, I'd go with something like that just because. And if it's clear water, that's where you go with that ghost color. But that's my favorite baits for spring. That's how I like to fish them and kind of where I like to fish them. So if you like the video, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.